In the glittering chaos of New Year's Eve at the Obsidian, the most exclusive underground club on the East Coast, everyone was counting down to midnight. But Elena Hart wasn't celebrating. The 28-year-old cleaning woman in her faded black uniform only wanted to play a soft melody to help her feverish 6-year-old daughter fall asleep in the staff room. She hadn't touched a violin in 8 years, not since the accident that shattered her wrist and destroyed her dreams of becoming a concert violinist. But tonight, her little girl was burning with fever and crying for music, the way she always did when she missed her father. So Elena broke every rule. She opened the glass case holding the antique violin, lifted it with trembling hands, and began to play. The moment the first notes rose into the air, Dominic Vale froze on the marble staircase. The 36-year-old mafia boss, known as the Shadow King for his cold ruthlessness, felt his heart stop beating. He knew this melody, every single note. It was the exact song his first love had played for him the night she died in his arms 10 years ago. She had whispered that she composed it just for him, a secret between their souls that she took to her grave. No one else in this world had ever heard it. So why was this woman, this nobody in a cleaning uniform, playing it now? His hands gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. His steel-gray eyes locked onto her with dangerous intensity. Because the woman who wrote that song, the only woman he had ever loved, had been dead for a decade, and she had sworn the melody belonged to him alone. If you want to know the dark secrets behind this melody and what happens when these two broken souls collide, smash that like button right now. Share this story with someone who loves a good mystery, and subscribe to never miss what comes next. Dominic Vale began to descend the staircase, each step slow but deliberate, like a king moving in on his prey, and the crowd in the grand hall seemed to be pushed aside by an invisible force, parting on its own into two silent lines that formed a straight, spotless passage leading to the violin. No one dared to breathe too loudly, no one dared to shift, because they all knew that when the Shadow King moved with that look in his eyes, someone was about to pay. But Elena knew nothing of it, still drowned in the melody, her amber eyes sealed shut, her fingers trembling yet guiding the bow with a strange, undeniable mastery, the music pouring out of her as if a spring had been dammed for far too long and had finally found a way to break free. And in that moment she was no longer a cleaning woman in a faded uniform. She was Elena Hart from 8 years ago, a Juilliard student with an entire bright future laid out before her. The final note lingered and then dissolved into the air, and Elena opened her eyes, a faint smile still resting on her lips as she thought of Lily sleeping peacefully in the staff room. But that smile froze at once when she realized the man standing directly in front of her, less than a single step away. Dominic Vale looking at her with steel-gray eyes as if they had been tempered in the fires of hell, with no loud anger, no shouting, only a silence more terrifying than any threat. Elena wanted to step back, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. She wanted to explain, but her throat was as dry as a desert, and then everything happened too fast. Dominic's hand shot out and clamped around her wrist, right over the long scar she always tried to hide beneath her sleeve. Pain tearing through Elena's arm like lightning, but she clenched her teeth and let no sound escape, because she was used to pain. 8 years of single motherhood had taught her how to swallow tears and keep walking. Dominic's voice came out, cold as ice in the heart of winter. "Where did you learn that song?" And it was not a question. It was an order demanding an answer. And Elena swallowed hard, fighting to find her voice again. "I did not learn it from anywhere." And Dominic's eyes narrowed, more dangerous, his grip tightening. "Don't lie to me." And then Elena said the thing she had never imagined would carry such consequences. "I wrote it." And those 3 words hit the quiet space like a bomb. Dominic going utterly still, the fury draining from his face, and replaced by something Elena could not read. Shock, disbelief, and perhaps, deep within those gray eyes, the ache of an old wound suddenly ripped open again. She wrote it. Not learned, not stolen. She said she had written the piece Serena had sworn belonged to them alone. And Victor Cross cut in, his voice trying to sound calm but unable to hide its unease. "Boss, she is just a cleaning woman, probably heard it somewhere." But Dominic did not turn. He did not even look at Victor, and a single word from his mouth made the entire hall lock in place. Everyone out, now. His voice not loud, even softer than usual, and that was what made it most frightening, because when the Shadow King whispered, that was when blood was about to spill. The crowd vanished as if it had never existed. The thunder of hurried footsteps, the slam of doors, and in less than a minute, the magnificent hall of the Obsidian stood completely empty, with only Dominic and Elena left behind. the most powerful man on the East Coast, and a cleaning woman with an old violin still in her hands. And he still had not released her wrist, and the way he looked at her, the way his gaze seemed to bore straight into her soul in search of the truth, made Elena suddenly remember a line from her sister's diary she had stumbled upon years ago. He looks at you as if you are his whole world, and you are afraid that one day he will look at you as if you are his enemy. And the last time Dominic Vale had looked at someone that way, she had died in his arms. Dominic dragged Elena through the empty hall, his hand still clamped around her wrist as if he feared she might vanish the moment he let go, and Elena struggled to keep up with his long strides, her feet stumbling on the ice-cold marble beneath her shoes. She wanted to cry out that her daughter was still asleep in the staff room, that Lily had a fever and needed her mother close, but the way Dominic Vale looked at her strangled every word before it could reach her lips. He shoved her into a room behind the hall, likely his private office, and the click of the lock behind her landed like a fated hammer blow. The room was spacious, filled with dark wood and expensive paintings, yet Elena saw nothing but the man standing between her and the only door. Dominic unfastened the buttons of his suit vest and tossed his jacket onto the sofa with a motion that was tightly controlled, every movement carrying the kind of restrained danger that reminded her of a big cat circling its prey before the killing strike. He poured himself a glass of whiskey without offering her any, and sat in a black leather chair across from where she stood. "Tell me everything," he said, and his voice was no longer icy but something far more frightening, calm in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck rise. Elena swallowed hard, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. "I already told you. I wrote that song." Dominic tilted his head, gray eyes narrowing. "You know who I am. I am Dominic Vale. I control everything that moves up and down this East Coast. I have eyes and ears everywhere. And you, a cleaning woman in a uniform torn at the shoulder, are telling me you wrote the piece my lover composed with her own hands." Elena felt the blood in her body turn to ice at the words "my lover." Dominic set the glass down with a dry, blunt thud. "That song was composed by Serena Hart. She died 10 years ago. So either you are lying, or you stole it from her." The world around Elena seemed to stop turning. Serena. That name. The name she had tried to bury in her chest for 10 years. The name of the sister she loved more than anyone on earth. The sister who left without a goodbye and stranded her with grief and questions that never found answers. "Serena," Elena whispered, her voice breaking into pieces. "Serena was my sister." The air in the room changed completely. Dominic surged to his feet, the whiskey glass slipping from his hand and dropping onto the carpet, amber liquid spreading out like a bloodstain. "You're what?" Elena held his gaze, tears already sliding down her cheeks without her even realizing they had started. "My younger sister. Serena Hart was my older sister. She was 6 years older than me. She died when I was 18, and since then, there has not been a single day I have not thought of her." Dominic stepped back as if someone had driven a fist straight into his chest. "That is impossible. Serena never told me she had a sister. In the 3 years they were together, she talked about her parents, her childhood, her dreams and her fears, but not once, not a single time, did she ever mention having a sister." "Why?" His voice roughened. "Why did she never talk about you?" Elena shook her head, the tears falling faster now. "I do not know. I have so many questions too. I only know that after she died, my parents forbade me from looking into anything about her life. They said it was too dangerous. They said I would die if I got tangled up in Serena's past." And then the pieces in Elena's mind began to slide into place. Serena's diary, the rushed lines about a man she called him, a man powerful and dangerous, a man she loved with a kind of madness, but never dared to name, a man for whom Serena had hidden the very existence of her little sister to protect her. "It was you," Elena whispered, amber eyes wide with shock. "You were my sister's lover. You were the man she wrote about in her diary." Dominic did not answer. He did not need to. His silence said everything. Elena drew a long breath, fighting the shake in her voice. "She did not write that song. I did. I gave it to her as a birthday gift when she turned 18. It was my gift to her, my composition, my heart poured into every note." Dominic moved toward her, and the distance between them was only a few steps now. "You are lying." Elena lifted her chin, meeting the gaze of the Mafia boss without blinking. "I can prove it. The original manuscript is in my apartment, with my name on it, my handwriting, dated 12 years ago, 2 years before Serena even met you." Dominic Vale had built an empire on his ability to spot a lie. He had watched the coldest criminals drop to their knees and confess. He had watched the most dangerous enemies tremble in front of him, yet the pain in those amber eyes and the raw truth in that trembling voice looked exactly like the real thing. A cry tore through the tension in the room, the sound of a child, small and fragile yet drenched in fear, echoing from somewhere down the far end of the hallway, and Elena snapped toward the door at once, the instinct of a mother smashing through every other fear inside her. "Lily, my daughter." She looked at Dominic with pleading eyes, no longer caring that the man in front of her could kill her at any moment. "Please. She has a fever. She needs me." Dominic studied her for a long time, gray eyes giving away nothing, and then he stepped aside and unlocked the door. "Go." Elena ran out immediately, yet she could hear Dominic's footsteps close behind her. He did not trust her. He would not let her out of his sight, not after what had just been revealed. The staff room sat at the end of a narrow corridor, pale yellow light spilling through the crack of a half-open door, and Elena shoved it wider, her heart breaking at the sight of Lily curled up on the worn old sofa, eyes red from crying, blonde hair, a tangled mess, plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Mommy." That tiny call drove straight into Elena like a blade, and she rushed forward, scooping her child into her arms, feeling Lily's burning little body tremble against her. "I am here. I am here. Sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Lily clung to Elena's neck, tears soaking her mother's shoulder. "I was so scared. I woke up and you were gone. I kept calling you, and you did not answer." Elena kissed Lily's forehead, checking her temperature, still feverish but lower than before, and she murmured soothing words, rubbing her daughter's back with the gentle motions her hands knew by heart. Then she felt the air change. Dominic stood in the doorway, his whole body gone still, and when Elena turned, she saw something she had never seen on the face of this Mafia king. Shock. Not the cold shock from hearing her claim about the music, but the shock of someone who has just seen a ghost rise out of the past. Lily turned too, wide green eyes curious as she stared at the stranger in the doorway. "Mommy, who is that man?" Elena had not even found an answer when Dominic stepped inside, each step heavy as though he were walking through water, and he could not take his eyes off Lily. He did not blink. He barely seemed to breathe. The child's green eyes, the shine of her blonde hair, the small smile that appeared when she tilted her head at him, the slight frown of curiosity, every detail, every line, as if someone had taken the image of his younger brother and shrunk it into a 6-year-old girl. "What is your daughter's name?" Dominic asked, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable, and he did not look at Elena when he spoke because he could not tear his gaze away from the child. Elena tightened her arms around Lily, a new fear beginning to creep into her chest. "Lily. Lily Hart." Dominic swallowed, his throat dry as a desert. "Her father." The question hung in the air, heavy as stone. Elena closed her eyes for a single beat, as if bracing for a blow she knew was coming, and then she opened them and looked straight into Dominic's eyes. Marcus Vale. He died 5 years ago. Time seemed to stop. Dominic stood there as if the life had been pulled out of him. Marcus, his brother, the brother he believed had cut ties with the family 10 years earlier, the brother he believed had walked away because he hated the world Dominic had built, the brother he had not spoken to for a decade because he was sure Marcus had chosen distance. But Marcus had not only left, Marcus had married Serena's sister, the sister of the woman Dominic had loved, and Marcus had had a daughter with the same green eyes, the same smile, the same slight tilt of the head, a niece Dominic had never known existed. For 6 years, while he sat alone in his cold penthouse building his empire, counting money, burying himself in loneliness, this little girl had been growing up without ever knowing she had an uncle in the world. He had missed her first steps, missed her first words, missed birthdays, Christmas nights, all the moments when a child needs family close. Dominic felt his knees weaken. He wanted to collapse right there, but the pride of the Shadow King would not allow it. Instead, he only stood, staring at the child who carried his blood, and felt something shatter inside him. "Mommy, why is the man crying?" Lily asked, her voice innocent and clear. And Elena looked up and realized Dominic Vale, the infamous Mafia boss, the man this entire city feared, had tears sliding down his cheeks without even knowing it. In a single night, Dominic Vale discovered that everything he had believed about the past had been a lie. Dominic did not say another word. He only motioned for Elena to carry Lily and follow, and the three of them moved through the silent corridors of the Obsidian, into a private elevator that rose straight to the penthouse on the highest floor. Elena wanted to protest, wanted to say she needed to take her child home, but Dominic's look strangled every sentence before it could be born. This was not an invitation. This was an order, and in the Shadow King's world, an order was not something you were allowed to refuse. Dominic's penthouse was vast and cold, like the man who owned it, the glass walls opening onto the entire city at night, lights blinking below like a million stars fallen to the ground. The furnishings were stripped down and minimal, all black and gray, no family photos, no personal keepsakes, nothing that carried the warmth of a human life. This was the home of a man who had surrendered everything that could be called comfort. Elena laid Lily on the bed in the sitting room, the little girl already asleep from fever and exhaustion on the way up, and she tucked the blanket around her, kissed Lily's forehead, then rose to face Dominic. He stood by the window with his back to her, staring down at the city as though searching for something he had lost a long time ago. The silence stretched until it felt impossible to breathe. At last, Dominic spoke without turning. "Tell me about that night. The night Serena died." Elena drew in a deep breath, and the pain of memory came rushing back like floodwater. "I was not there when she died. I only know from the call from the hospital at 3 in the morning. They said my sister had been shot. They said she did not make it." Her voice tightened. "The funeral happened fast, and it happened quietly. My parents forbade anyone from coming to pay their respects. They said someone dangerous was targeting our family. They said if I asked anything about Serena's life, I would die the way she did." Dominic turned, and his gray eyes had gone dark as a sky before a storm. "You do not know anything about that night, about what really happened." Elena shook her head. "I only know my sister loved someone very deeply. She wrote about him in her diary, but she never said his name. She said the relationship was too dangerous to reveal." Dominic closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were 10 years of pain held tight inside. "That night was my birthday. Serena wanted to surprise me. She booked a table at our favorite restaurant, the place where we had our first date. We were walking back to the car when they came. 3 men, black masks, guns." His voice cracked. "The first bullet was meant for me, but Serena shoved me aside. She stepped in front of me, and the bullet went through her chest." Elena covered her mouth, tears pouring down. "She died in my arms," Dominic went on, his voice now nothing but a whisper. "Her blood soaked my hands. I called her name, begged her to open her eyes, but she only smiled and said one thing before she was gone." He stopped, jaw clenched tight. "She said, 'Protect her family.' I did not understand. She did not have any family that I knew. Her parents had been gone for years, and she never told me she had a sister." Elena felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Serena had tried to protect her, even in her final second, carrying the secret of her little sister to the grave to make sure Elena stayed safe. "I never knew who Serena was dating," Elena said, her voice trembling. "She kept it secret, said it was too dangerous, said that if anyone found out, everyone she loved would be in danger." Dominic stepped closer, something burning in his eyes between rage and despair. "Dangerous. I would have died for her. I would have burned the whole world down to keep her safe. And she thought I was the danger." Elena looked him straight in the eyes, her voice turning unexpectedly sharp. "Someone did die. Just not you." Dominic went still, and the pieces began to lock together in his mind, forming a picture so terrible it made his blood run cold. Serena hid the existence of her sister. Elena's parents forbade her from reaching out to anyone from Serena's past. Marcus left the family 10 years ago, at the exact time Serena died, and married her sister without anyone knowing. And he, Dominic Vale, the man who controlled the entire East Coast, had known nothing about any of it for a decade. Someone had deliberately hidden the Hart family from him. Someone had separated his brother from the Vale family. Someone had arranged everything 10 years ago, making sure that everyone tied to Serena would vanish from Dominic's life. But who had the power to do that? Who could bury the truth right under the Shadow King's nose? Who benefited from Dominic living inside loneliness and hatred? The answer began to take shape in his mind, and it froze the blood in his veins. "There was someone," Dominic said slowly, each word heavy as lead. "Someone who had access to everything. Someone who could make people disappear. Someone who wanted me to become exactly what I am now." Elena stared at him, not understanding. "Who?" Dominic did not answer. He only looked back out the window, toward a tall building on the far side of the city, where an old man was asleep in a penthouse of his own. There was a puppet master behind all of it, and Dominic was starting to suspect he already knew exactly who it was. The early New Year sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of the penthouse, as Dominic drove Elena back to her apartment. Lily was still sleeping soundly upstairs, watched by a trusted servant, and Elena had agreed, reluctantly, to leave her there only after Dominic promised nothing would happen to the little girl. The entire way, neither of them spoke. Dominic kept both hands tight on the wheel, gray eyes fixed on the road, while his mind churned with thousands of questions that had no answers. The car stopped in front of a weathered old building on the west side of the city, a place Dominic had never set foot in during all his years ruling the East Coast. The walls were blotched with damp stains. The rusted metal stairwell groaned under every step, and the air was thick with mildew mixed with the smell of food drifting out of other apartments. Elena unlocked the door to a unit on the 5th floor, and Dominic stepped inside as if he had entered a completely different world. The apartment was so small he could take it all in at a glance. A worn sofa with tears patched over using tape. A tiny dining table with only 2 chairs, one of them missing a leg and propped up with a stack of books. A kitchen corner with a little refrigerator Dominic was certain was emptier than his own heart. On the table lay a heap of papers, and he did not even need to look closely to know they were overdue bills, unpaid rent, and threats of eviction. This was his niece's life. This was where a child carrying the Vale bloodline had grown up for 6 years. While he sat in a $1 million penthouse, she had gone hungry in this shabby room. Anger flared in Dominic's chest, but not at Elena. At himself, furious that he had not known. Furious that he had let his brother walk away without searching. Furious that he had believed Marcus hated him enough to disappear entirely. Elena did not look at him. She had lived with poverty too long to feel ashamed of it anymore. She went straight to the corner of the room and pulled an old wooden box from under the bed. The manuscript is in here. She lifted the lid, and the faint scent of aged paper rose into the air. Inside were the keepsakes of a lifetime, fragments of memory guarded carefully through the years. Elena turned over folders of pages and photographs until she found what she was looking for. A bundle of sheet music yellowed by time, the notes written in careful black ink by hand. Here. She held it out to Dominic. He took it as if it were a bomb that could go off at any moment. The title, written in a graceful hand at the top of the first page, Velvet Requiem, and beneath it, the date, clear as day, 12 years ago, 2 years before Dominic met Serena. In the upper right corner of that first page was the composer's signature, Elena Hart, not Serena, Elena. Dominic turned to the next page and felt his heart squeeze shut. A small letter was tucked between the sheets, handwriting he would have recognized even with his eyes closed. Serena's handwriting. My dearest little sister, thank you for the most beautiful song I have ever heard. I do not know how to describe what I felt when I listened to these notes. It is as if you looked straight through my soul and wrote down everything I could never put into words. I will keep it forever. Love you, Serena. Dominic read the letter again and again, each word cutting into him like a blade. Serena had lied. The peace he believed was her love, meant for him alone, had been a gift from her sister. The music he had played and replayed 1,000 times over the last 10 years, grieving the dead, had been written by the woman standing in front of him now. And yet, strangely, Dominic did not hate Serena for it. He understood. He understood how fear of loss could drive people to desperate choices. He understood how love could make someone lie in order to hold on to what they treasured most. Serena had been afraid she was not enough, afraid he would leave her, and so she had taken her sister's song and made it her own, so she could keep him beside her. What hurt him was not the lie. What hurt him was that for 10 years he had been mourning a piece of music whose creator was still alive, still breathing, still standing right here with amber eyes full of pain. Is there anything else in this box? Dominic asked, his voice rough. Elena rummaged through it again, and suddenly her hands stopped. She pulled out a photograph, her face draining pale as if she had just seen a ghost. It was a wedding photo of her and Marcus. Elena in a simple white dress, Marcus in a black suit, both of them smiling brightly at the camera. But it was not their smiles that stunned her. Behind Marcus, far back in a corner of the frame, stood a tall man with black hair and gray eyes cold as steel. His face was ice, empty of emotion, and yet unmistakable. You were at our wedding, Elena whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Dominic stared at the photo, memory crashing in like a flood. He remembered that day. Marcus had called him after 5 years of silence and invited him to the wedding. Dominic had gone, believing it might be a chance to mend what had broken. But the moment he stepped inside, an urgent call from his father forced him to leave immediately. He had not even seen the bride's face. I was, Dominic said, his voice heavy. I just did not stay long enough to see the bride. Marcus had invited his brother to the wedding, but someone had made sure Dominic left before he could ever look at the woman his brother was marrying. While Dominic and Elena faced their painful truths inside that shabby apartment, another pair of eyes was watching every movement from a distance. Victor Cross sat in a black car parked on the corner across the street, binoculars trained on the fifth-floor window. He had been tracking them since last night, since the moment Dominic ordered everyone out of the hall. In 15 years as the Shadow King's right hand, Victor had never seen Dominic lose control like that, and it unsettled him. He lowered the binoculars and opened the laptop on the passenger seat. All night long, while Dominic brought the woman and the child up to the penthouse, Victor had dug up every piece of information he could find on Elena Hart, and what he found turned his spine to ice. Elena Hart, 28 years old, once a full scholarship student at Juilliard. A promising violin career ended after a car accident 8 years ago. Married to Marcus Vale 7 years ago. A widow after her husband died in a car accident 5 years ago. Marcus Vale, Dominic's younger brother. The man Victor had personally taken care of on someone else's order. And there was one more connection that nearly stopped Victor's breathing when he read it. Serena Hart, Elena's older sister. Dominic's former lover. The woman who died 10 years ago in an assassination the world believed was carried out by Dominic's enemies. The Hart family, both sisters tied to the Vale brothers. This was not coincidence. This was a timed bomb waiting to detonate. Victor picked up his phone and pressed the only number in his contacts he called only when something was at its most serious. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. The voice on the other end was old, but it still carried authority. The authority of a man who had ruled the Vale Empire before handing it to his son. "What is it, Victor?" Victor drew a slow breath. "Sir, we have a problem. The Hart woman. She is back." Silence stretched until it was hard to breathe. Then Richard Vale's voice came through, cold and more dangerous than any snake. "Which one? I thought I dealt with both of them years ago." The words dragged every memory back into Victor's mind. 10 years ago, it had been Richard Vale who ordered him to arrange the assassination of Serena Hart. Richard said Serena was making Dominic weak, that love was a luxury the heir to the Vale Empire was not allowed to have. Dominic had to be steel. Dominic had to be ice. Dominic had to become the Shadow King the world feared. And Serena Hart was turning Richard's son into something soft, willing to give up everything for a smile. So she had to die. And she did, right in front of Dominic, so he would learn that love only brought pain. Richard Vale got what he wanted. Dominic became colder, more ruthless, and more powerful than ever, the perfect Shadow King he had created. "The younger one," Victor answered. "Elena. She is working at the Obsidian as a cleaning woman, and Dominic has found her." "Found her how?" Richard's voice sharpened. "She was playing a violin last night, the song Serena used to play, the one Dominic believed Serena composed for him." Victor heard the heavy breathing on the other end. The old man was thinking, calculating, like a spider deciding what to do with prey caught in its web. "There is more, sir," Victor continued. "Elena was married to Marcus. They have a daughter, 6 years old. Dominic has seen the child. He knows she is his niece." A hard slam sounded through the phone, so violent Victor had to pull it away from his ear. "That family is cursed," Richard roared. "First, Serena poisoned my son's mind with her violin and her smiles. I thought I had cut that poison out. But now the sister appears, and she has a child. Marcus's child." Victor waited, because he knew the old man was not finished. "I ordered you to deal with Marcus 5 years ago, because he was going to tell Dominic the truth about Serena's death," Richard went on, his voice settling into something calm again, and colder than ever. "He found out what I did. He was going to destroy everything I built. So he had to go. And you made it look like an accident. A tire blowout on the highway. Clean. Simple. No questions asked." Victor remembered that night, the way he cut the brake line on Marcus's car, the way he stood at a distance and watched the vehicle plunge down the ravine, the way he reported back to Richard that the job was done. "What do you want me to do now, sir?" Victor asked, even though he already knew the answer. Silence held for a few seconds. Then Richard Vale's voice returned, cold as a death sentence. "The same thing you did to Marcus. Make it look like an accident. The woman and the child. Both of them. I will not let another Hart woman destroy what I have built. Dominic will thank me one day, when he realizes emotions are weaknesses, and weaknesses must be eliminated." Victor nodded even though Richard could not see him. "Yes, sir. I will handle it." He ended the call, and looked up at the fifth-floor window one last time. Elena Hart and her little girl were in there, unaware their lives had just been decided by a phone call. She had survived poverty, loss, the pain of losing her husband, but she had no idea a kill order had just been issued for her. Dominic drove Elena back to the penthouse in silence, his mind still spinning with what he had just uncovered. The original manuscript bearing Elena's signature, Serena's thank you letter, the wedding photo where he appeared in the frame without ever knowing who the bride was. And for 10 years he had been living inside a web of lies without realizing it. When they stepped into the penthouse, Lily was still asleep on the sofa, a thin blanket tucked carefully up to her chin, and Elena rushed to her at once, checked her forehead, then let out a breath when she felt the fever had broken. She turned to Dominic with a guarded stare. "Thank you for last night, but now I need to take my daughter home." Dominic folded his arms and positioned himself between her and the door. "No," Elena frowned. "You have no right to keep us here." "I have every right," Dominic replied, his voice refusing to yield. "Your apartment is not safe. You have no money. You have no one to protect you. And my niece is not going to grow up in that broken matchbox." Anger flared in Elena's chest. "I have raised my child alone for 5 years without needing help from anyone. I do not need your pity. This is not pity." Dominic stepped closer, gray eyes locked on hers. "Lily is my niece, the only family I have left. I will not let her grow up in poverty when I have the means to give her everything." Elena wanted to fight back, wanted to say she had managed for years, but then she looked at her daughter sleeping, remembered the nights Lily cried from hunger, the times Elena had gone without food so her child could have enough milk, the piles of bills she did not know how she would ever pay, and she could endure poverty for herself. But what right did she have to force Lily to endure it with her? "I do not want to owe anyone," Elena said, her voice weakening as the resistance in her began to collapse. Dominic moved closer, his tone softening slightly, yet still carrying that unshakable certainty. "This is not a favor. This is responsibility. Marcus was my brother. He walked away because I did not find a way to keep him. He died, and I did not even know he had a child. I failed my brother. I will not fail his daughter." Before Elena could answer, a small voice came from behind them. "Mommy." They both turned. Lily was awake now, green eyes still heavy with sleep, staring at Dominic with curiosity threaded with caution. She slid off the sofa and took small steps toward her mother, without taking her gaze off the strange man. "Are you a bad man?" Lily asked bluntly, her voice clear as a bell. "Mommy works for bad men. Mommy says I have to stay away from bad men." Elena reached as if to pull her close, but Dominic knelt, lowering himself to the child's eye level, and it was the first time Elena had ever seen the Shadow King bow his head for anyone. Dominic looked into those green eyes that mirrored his brother's, and his voice softened in a way Elena had not believed possible. "I have done bad things," he admitted, without trying to dodge it. "A lot of bad things. But I would never, ever hurt you or your mother. Do you know why?" Lily shook her head, still not fully convinced. "Because your daddy was my little brother," Dominic said, and something in his voice silenced both Elena and Lily. "He was the best person I ever knew, and I was not there when he needed me. But I am here now, and I promise I will protect you." Lily tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if weighing whether he deserved belief. "Pinky promise," she said, holding out her tiny little finger. Elena stopped breathing. Dominic Vale, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, the man the entire underworld trembled before, stared at his niece's small finger, then extended his own and hooked it around hers with the solemnity of signing a multi-million-dollar contract. Pinky promise. Elena watched the scene and felt her heart split between wanting to believe and being terrified to believe. Because she had seen too many men perform, speak sweetly, and betray, and she had learned how not to trust anyone but herself. Yet the way Dominic looked at Lily, the way he knelt before a 6-year-old, the way his voice trembled when he said Marcus's name, she could not tell whether it was an act or the truth, and because she could not tell, she decided she would stay, but she would not trust him. Not yet. That night, when Elena and Lily were asleep in the sitting room, Dominic sat alone in his study, the pale yellow glow of a desk lamp falling over a thick stack of files laid open before him, the file on Marcus's death, because he had ordered his people to bring him every document tied to the crash 5 years earlier. The police report, the autopsy findings, the crime scene photographs, witness statements, and the more he read, the more something felt wrong. Marcus's car had suffered a tire blowout on a straight stretch of road, at low speed, in good weather, the safest driving conditions imaginable. So why had the tire blown? Why had Marcus not had time to react? Why had the car gone straight into the ravine instead of stopping? Dominic turned to the final page where the police conclusion sat in neat, dead certainty. Accident. No signs of foul play. Case closed. But Dominic knew what the police did not. He knew how people made murder look like an accident. He had ordered it done many times in his career, and this had every mark of a perfectly disguised assassination. "Someone murdered my brother," Dominic murmured into the darkness, his voice cold as steel. "And I am going to find out who." He did not know that in this very moment, the man who killed Marcus was planning another assassination, and this time the target was the woman sleeping only a few steps away from him. The hunter had become the prey, he just did not know it yet. 1 week passed like a dream Elena could not quite believe was real, as Dominic's vast penthouse slowly became familiar. From the supple leather sofa where Lily loved to curl up with a book, to the modern kitchen where Elena began cooking her first real meals after years of surviving day to day on instant noodles and bread. And Dominic arranged a new job for her, managing the books for the Obsidian, work that was far lighter than scrubbing floors and clearing tables. And more importantly, it let her take Lily to school and then go to work on flexible hours. Elena still kept her distance from Dominic, still did not fully trust him, yet she could not deny that life for mother and daughter had changed completely. Lily no longer woke in the night crying from hunger. She had enough warm clothes, new toys, and most of all, she had someone willing to sit for hours listening to the winding, endless stories only a child can tell. What surprised Elena most was the bond forming between Lily and Dominic, as if the 6-year-old possessed a rare gift for breaking every wall the Shadow King had built over 10 years, because each night Lily insisted Uncle Dom tell her a story before she slept, and Dominic, the man the whole city feared, would sit by her bed for hours, speaking of princesses and knights in a low, warm voice Elena had never imagined he had. There were moments when Elena stood outside Lily's door, watching them through the narrow crack left open, and she began to see a Dominic she had never met. Not the cold mafia boss, not the terrifying Shadow King, but a lonely man trying to pay back years he had lost with family. That morning, Elena drove the car Dominic had given her and took Lily to school like any other day. Lily in the back seat hugging the new teddy bear Uncle Dom had just bought her, chattering about the picture she planned to draw for him, and Elena smiled at her through the rearview mirror, her heart warming in a way that felt strange, as if, maybe, just maybe, their lives were finally turning toward something good. They were on the highway with about 10 minutes left before Lily's school when everything happened. Elena pressed the brake to slow for a curve, but the pedal sank to the floor without any resistance. No, 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 no. She pressed again, and again, but the car did not slow. The brakes were gone. "Mommy," Lily's voice rose from behind her, sharp with fear. "Why is the car going so fast?" Elena fought to stay calm, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. She yanked the parking brake, but at this speed, the car only fishtailed instead of stopping. The curve rushed closer, the concrete divider filled her vision, and in a split second, Elena made her choice. She wrenched the wheel to the right, trying to strike the divider at an angle instead of head-on. At least that way the impact would be reduced. At least Lily might have a chance to live. There was the scream of metal, the shattering of glass, Lily's cry, and then everything fell into darkness. Elena woke in the hospital, her body aching as if it had been crushed. She tried to sit up, but pain ripped through her chest and she cried out, and a warm hand settled on her shoulder, gently pushing her back down. "Do not move," Dominic's voice said close to her ear. "You have 2 broken ribs." Elena did not care about herself. "Lily, where is my child?" "Lily is fine," Dominic answered, and Elena saw relief in his gray eyes, just minor scrapes and shock. "She is sleeping in the room next door. The doctor said she will fully recover." Elena broke into sobs, tears running down her cheeks. She had almost lost her. Almost. "The brakes," she said through the shaking of her breath. "The brakes did not work. I pressed and it did not." "I know," Dominic cut in, and something in his voice made Elena go still. "My people checked the car. The brake line was cut. Cut, not failed. This was not an accident, Elena. Someone tried to kill you and Lily." The blood in Elena's veins seemed to turn to ice. She looked at Dominic and saw something in him she had not seen before. Not the coldness of the Shadow King, but the raw fury of a man on the edge of losing what he treasures. "Just like the way Marcus died," Dominic said, his voice trembling with restraint. The brakes were cut. The car went out of control. 5 years ago, my brother died that way, and now someone is trying to do the same thing to you. He stood, turning his back to her, but Elena could see his shoulders shaking. I believed Marcus's death was an accident. I accepted it for 5 years, but now I know the truth. My brother was murdered, and the one who killed him is coming for you. Dominic turned back, his gray eyes burning with a rage Elena had never witnessed. He pulled out his phone and made a single call. I want a list of everyone who knew Elena's schedule this morning. Everyone. From the doorman to the manager. Find out who touched that car. I want answers within 1 hour. He ended the call, and in that instant, he was no longer the man who told Lily gentle stories each night. He was the Shadow King, and someone was going to pay. 2 hours later, the investigation came back. Only 5 people knew Elena would be driving Lily to school that morning. 4 of them were staff who had worked for Dominic for more than 10 years, loyal without question. The 5th was Victor Cross. Victor, the man who had been watching Dominic since New Year's Eve. The man who asked about Elena's schedule yesterday, under the excuse of arranging protection. The man who had been Dominic's right hand for 15 years. Dominic stared at that name on the list, and a cold truth began to take shape in his mind, because he had trusted Victor for 15 years, but trust was only another word for blindness. In the days after the crash, Dominic lived in 2 worlds at once. On the surface he remained the Shadow King, steady and composed, meeting Victor every day to discuss business as if nothing had changed, nodding as Victor reported, offering a thin, cold smile when Victor proposed new plans, even clapping him on the shoulder and saying he trusted him more than anyone. But underneath that calm mask, Dominic was quietly weaving an invisible net around the man he once treated like a brother. He hired private investigators from outside the city, men with no ties to the Vale Empire, to dig into every move Victor had made over the past 10 years. Dominic wanted to know where Victor was the night Serena was shot. He wanted to know what Victor did on the day Marcus died. And he wanted to know who had given Victor the order, because Dominic understood better than anyone that Victor Cross never acted alone. Victor was the blade, but there was always a hand holding it. Meanwhile, Elena was slowly healing in the penthouse. 2 broken ribs made every deep breath a fresh stab of pain, but she refused to stay still. She forced herself to walk, forced herself to care for Lily even when every movement felt like someone was driving a knife into her chest. Lily would not leave her mother for a single step. The 6-year-old seemed to understand that something terrible had almost happened, and she clung to Elena as if her mother might disappear the moment she looked away. Every night Lily climbed into bed beside her, wrapped both arms around Elena's arm, and whispered that she loved her before falling asleep. That night the pain would not let Elena rest. The medication had worn off, and every breath cut her. She gently eased Lily's hand away, tucked the blanket back around her, then slipped out to the sitting room. A pale yellow pool of lamplight spilled from the corner where Dominic sat alone by the window. He held a glass of whiskey but did not drink it, only stared out at the city lights with eyes so distant it was as if he were looking into another world. Elena meant to turn back, not wanting to disturb him, but Dominic spoke without turning his head. "You cannot sleep." Elena let out a small sigh and walked over to sit on the sofa across from him. "It hurts too much." "And you?" she asked softly in return. "Why are you awake?" Dominic was quiet for a long time, his fingers turning the whiskey glass as if it were the only solid thing he could hold. "I do not sleep much. I have not slept much for 10 years. Since Serena died." Elena looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time without caution or suspicion. She saw the fatigue carved into his face, the shadows lodged in his gray eyes, the loneliness he kept hidden beneath the Shadow King's cold armor. "You still remember my sister," Elena said gently. Not a question. Dominic gave a bitter smile. "For 10 years I have still heard her laughter in my dreams. For 10 years I have still woken up and reached to the other side, hoping she was there. 10 years and I still—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "After Serena died, I became the monster everyone expected me to be." His voice dropped lower. "I thought if I felt nothing, I could not be hurt again. So I buried everything, every emotion, every weakness. I became the Shadow King, cold, ruthless, untouchable." Elena listened, her heart aching, because she understood that instinct too. She had done the same after Marcus died, locked her heart tight, refused to feel, focused only on surviving. "Did it work?" she asked softly. Dominic turned to her, and in his gray eyes Elena saw 10 years of pain held down like a fist on a wound. "No," he admitted. "The emptiness was worse than the pain. At least when you feel pain, you know you are still alive. But when you feel nothing—" He shook his head. "You just exist, like a ghost haunting your own body." Elena did not think. She simply moved on instinct. She reached across and brushed her fingertips against his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her touch, and she felt him go still, as if it had been far too long since anyone had touched him at all, as if he had forgotten what gentleness felt like. Dominic looked at her, and something lit in those gray eyes that Elena could not name. He caught her hand, not to push it away, but to keep it. He pressed her palm against his chest, right over his heart. Elena felt the beat beneath her hand, strong and unnaturally fast. "I do not know what this is," Dominic whispered, his voice rough, "but I have not felt my heart beat like this in 10 years. Elena knew she should pull her hand back. She knew she should stand and return to the bedroom. She knew this was dangerous, forbidden ground, the kind of thing that could ruin them both if they took one more step. But she did not pull away. And he did not let go. They were falling, and neither of them knew how to stop. 3 days after that night, an unexpected call changed everything. Elena was sitting in the living room watching Lily draw when her phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end made her go rigid. "Elena, my child, this is Arthur Chen, your violin teacher from back then. I need to see you. There is something important I have to tell you before it is too late." Arthur Chen. The name yanked Elena backward into a distant past, to the days when she was a 10-year-old girl holding a bow for the first time, to the small music room where he taught both her and Serena their very first notes. He had vanished from her life after Serena died, and Elena always believed he had left the city, but it turned out he was still here, still serving as the manager of the Obsidian, quietly watching from afar through all these years. Elena met him in a small room behind the club, where the light was dim and the faint scent of disinfectant hung in the air. Arthur Chen had aged far beyond what memory allowed. Hair gone white, hands trembling, skin turned the dull gray of serious illness. He sat in an old armchair, breath rasping, yet his eyes still brightened when he saw her. "Elena, you have grown so much," he said, weak but full of feeling, so much like Serena, but more talented, always more talented. Elena sat across from him, not knowing that in the room next door Dominic was silently watching through a security camera feed. He knew Arthur Chen had asked to meet Elena, and he did not trust anyone to get close to her without a reason. "What did you want to tell me?" Elena asked softly. Arthur Chen closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering courage, and when he opened them again there was 10 years of torment and guilt inside them. "I am dying, Elena. End-stage lung cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say I have a few weeks, maybe a few days, and before I go, I cannot carry this secret with me any longer. It has been crushing me for too long." Elena clasped her hands tight, a sense in her bones telling her whatever she was about to hear would change everything. "I taught both you and Serena," Arthur Chen began, his voice trembling. "From the first lesson, I knew. You were the true talent. Music flowed through you like water through a river. Natural, effortless, beautiful." He paused, coughing hard in a long, painful fit. "And Serena. Serena loved music, but music did not love her back in that way. She had to work twice as hard to achieve half of what you could do, as if it were simply breathing, and she knew that. She always knew." A lump rose in Elena's throat. She had never known Serena felt that way. Her sister had always looked confident, always encouraged her, always said, "You are so good," with that warm smile. "When you gave her that song, Velvet Requiem, as a birthday gift," Arthur Chen continued, "she cried for hours, not from happiness, Elena, from jealousy, because that song was more beautiful than anything she could ever compose, and she knew it." In the room next door, Dominic's hands clenched, his heart hammering. "Serena took your song," Arthur Chen said, his voice heavy with pain. "She told Dominic Vale that she composed it, that it was her heart poured into music, just for him. She lied because she was desperate, desperate to keep him, desperate to prove she was worthy of him." Elena covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She was afraid. Elena whispered. She was afraid. Arthur Chen nodded. Afraid that if Dominic knew she was not as talented as she pretended, he would leave her. Afraid she was not good enough for him. So she took the one thing she believed would keep him, your song, and made it hers. In the room next door, Dominic felt as if something inside his chest had been ripped open. Serena had been afraid he would leave. Serena had believed she did not deserve him, and he had been too blind in love to see it. He had done nothing to make her understand. He loved her for who she was, not for talent. "There is more," Arthur Chen said, and his voice suddenly hardened. "Before Serena died, she came to me. She was crying. She said she could not live with the lie anymore. She was going to tell Dominic everything. About the song, about her insecurities, about how she was not the person he thought she was. Elena went cold, and she died that night. She died that very night." Arthur Chen nodded, his eyes haunted. "I have asked myself for 10 years if that was a coincidence. And I know, deep in my heart, it was not." Elena shook. "You think someone killed her to keep her quiet. I do not think." Arthur Chen looked straight into her eyes. "I know. Because the same person had your husband Marcus killed when he figured out the truth 5 years ago." In the room next door, Dominic shot to his feet, his fist so tight his nails bit into his palm. "Marcus Vale discovered what really happened to Serena," Arthur Chen continued, his voice like a whisper from hell. "He found evidence. He was going to tell his brother everything. And then he died, in a car accident, just like how they tried to kill you last week. Elena, the brake line cut, the car out of control, the same pattern, the same hand." "Who?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "Who did all of this?" Arthur Chen looked at her with the fear of a man who had held a secret for too long. "The same person who benefits from Dominic becoming a heartless monster. The same person who wanted him to rule with iron and ice instead of love. The same person who has been controlling everything from the shadows. His father, Richard Vale." And the truth landed like a blade, sharp enough to sever everyone who dared to reach for it. Dominic stood in the darkness of his study with his back against the wall, eyes fixed on the empty space in front of him. Arthur Chen's words still echoing in his skull like funeral bells. Richard Vale, his father, the man who had brought him into this world, raised him, and shaped him into the Shadow King, the man Dominic had respected and obeyed for his entire life. He did not want to believe it. He told himself Arthur Chen was only an old man near death, that his mind might no longer be clear. He told himself there had to be another explanation. Some enemy he had missed, some rival family reckless enough to strike at the Vale bloodline. So he spent the whole night digging. He pulled every file on rival crime families across the last 10 years, examined every conflict, every grudge, every name that might have had a reason to target Serena or Marcus. But there was nothing, not a single thread pointing to an outside enemy, because the families that had stood against the Valese back then were either destroyed or had no reason to go after Dominic's lover and his brother. They would have aimed for the empire, the money, the power, not the heart. And then the truth began to sharpen, as clear as sunlight cutting through fog. Who was the only person who knew Serena's schedule the night she died? Who was the one who called Dominic right before the assassination, forcing him to step away from the restaurant for a brief moment and leaving Serena alone? Who insisted Dominic did not need to dig further after the police declared it the work of enemies? Who knew which road Marcus would drive on the day he died? Who invited Dominic to Marcus's wedding and then made a call that pulled him away immediately, so he never even saw the bride's face? Who had the power to cover everything for 10 years without anyone daring to question it? Who kept repeating that love was weakness, that emotion was the enemy, that the Shadow King had to be steel and ice? Every answer led to one man, his father, Richard Vale. Dominic collapsed into a chair, head dropping into his hands. His father had killed Serena. His father had ordered the woman Dominic loved more than his own life to be shot dead, and afterward he had stood by and watched Dominic break, watched him sink into despair and hatred, watched him become the cold monster his father wanted. His father had killed Marcus, his own son, the brother who discovered the truth and was going to tell Dominic. Marcus, who died on the highway alone in a car with its brakes cut, carrying the secret to the grave. And now his father was trying to kill Elena, the woman who had begun to melt the ice around Dominic's heart, and his niece, the 6-year-old with eyes exactly like Marcus. Richard Vale wanted to erase them all, simply to ensure his son remained the emotionless machine he had built. The phone rang, yanking Dominic out of the abyss, and the screen displayed a name that made his jaw lock so tight he could hear his teeth grind. Richard Vale. Dominic stared at it for a long moment, then answered, his voice calm in a way that shocked even him. "Father, Dominic, my son." Richard Vale's voice came through warm and concerned, the voice of a proper father. "I heard about the accident last week. Terrible. Are that girl and the child all right?" "They are fine," Dominic said, giving away nothing. Good. Good, Richard went on, and Dominic could hear the test hidden beneath the concern. But I think perhaps it is time you send her away. For her safety. You understand. Clearly someone is targeting the people around you. It is best she stays far from you for a while. Dominic closed his eyes. The man was probing him, checking what his son knew, checking whether his puppet was still obedient. You are right, father, Dominic replied, his tone so perfect even a seasoned actor would envy it. I will handle this. Good boy, Richard said, and Dominic could hear satisfaction settling into the old man's voice. I always knew you were smart. Do not let emotion cloud your judgment like last time. Yes, father, I understand. Dominic ended the call, and in that instant, all the pain, all the betrayal, all the loss crystallized into a single thing inside his gray eyes, a resolve colder than ice. Yes, father, he whispered into the darkness, his voice colder than it had been at any point in the last 10 years. I will handle it. The son had learned everything from the father, including how to destroy him. The days that followed moved in a strange rhythm. On the surface, Dominic remained the Shadow King, cold and controlled, still meeting Victor to discuss business, still running the Vale Empire as if nothing had changed. But underneath, he was quietly gathering proof, building a case against his own father. He needed time, needed absolute precision, because Richard Vale was no ordinary enemy. He was the man who built this empire from nothing, the man who taught Dominic everything he knew, and to defeat his father, Dominic would have to be flawless, because one small mistake and everything would collapse. And while he waited for the right moment, something unexpected happened. Dominic began to live, truly live, for the first time in 10 years. Lily was the catalyst. A 6-year-old with green eyes and a smile exactly like Marcus, she shattered every wall Dominic had built. Every morning she would race into his room, leap onto his bed, and demand a story. Every afternoon she would tug him out onto the balcony to watch the sunset and ask a million questions about the clouds, the stars, why the sky changed color. Every night she would insist Uncle Dom read her fairy tales, and Dominic, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, would sit by his niece's bed and clumsily imitate princesses and dragons with wholehearted devotion. Elena watched it all from a distance, and her heart softened, because this was not the bloodless monster she had imagined. This was a man who had lost too much, who had locked his heart away for too long, and who was now learning how to love again through a child. That night, when Lily was asleep, Elena stood by the living room window, looking out at the city lights. Her ribs hurt less now, and her wrist began to itch with the craving to touch a bow again. She turned and found Dominic sitting on the sofa, watching her with gray eyes so deep she could not read them. "Do you want me to play something?" she asked suddenly. "For you." Dominic did not speak. He only gave a small nod. Elena walked to the glass cabinet where Dominic had placed a new violin, the one he bought for her without saying a word. She lifted the bow, felt its familiar weight settle into her hand, and a feeling like coming home after a long journey filled her chest. She began to play Velvet Requiem, the piece she had written 12 years ago, the piece that had brought her here, to this penthouse, to this man. But this time, she played it her way, not the way Serena had played, but the way it had been meant to sound, carrying all the sorrow, all the hope, all the love she had poured into every note when she was a 16-year-old girl. Her wrist started to ache after a few minutes, but she did not stop. She played until the last note trembled and faded into the air, only then lowering the bow, her breathing heavy as pain spread through her arm, and then she looked at Dominic. He was crying, not sobbing, just silent tears sliding down his cheeks, falling onto his shirt without him bothering to wipe them away. For the first time in 10 years, the Shadow King was crying. "Why are you crying?" Elena asked softly as she stepped closer. Dominic lifted his gaze to her, gray eyes wet but lit with something she had never seen there before. "Because I spent 10 years loving a ghost," he said, his voice rough. 10 years mourning a song I thought was hers. 10 years holding on to a memory that was never real. He rose and stepped in front of her, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath against her lips. And the real thing was here all along. Elena understood he was not talking about the song. He was talking about her. Dominic raised his hand and touched her cheek, as if he feared she might disappear if he pressed too hard. And then he kissed her. It was not the kind of kiss you see in movies. It trembled. It was frightened, as if they were both standing on the edge of a cliff and did not know whether they should jump. They had lost too much. They had been betrayed too much. They had hurt too much. and they were both afraid that if they let themselves love again, they would not survive losing each other. "I do not know how to do this," Elena whispered when their lips parted. "I have forgotten how to trust, how to love, how to let someone in." "Neither do I," Dominic answered, his forehead resting against hers. "But I want to try. With you, if you will let me." Outside the penthouse, in the darkness, a camera lens flashed. Victor Cross lowered the camera, a cruel smile curling on his mouth. He had what he needed. He pulled out his phone and sent the photo of them kissing to a single number. Seconds later, a reply appeared. "So he has fallen for another heartwoman. History repeats itself." Then another message followed. "End this. Tonight." Victor smiled and slipped the phone into his pocket. Tonight would be Elena Hart's last night. Love was their greatest strength, but it was also their fatal weakness. The next morning, Dominic received an urgent call from Victor. There was trouble at the southern port. An important shipment had been stopped, and the Shadow King's presence was needed to resolve it. Dominic did not want to leave the penthouse, did not want to be away from Elena and Lily, but he could not refuse without raising suspicion. He was still pretending to trust Victor, still waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He kissed Elena's forehead, promised he would be back before dinner, then stepped into the elevator with 2 bodyguards at his side, not knowing he had just walked into a trap already laid. Elena stayed in the penthouse with Lily and 2 guards Dominic had assigned. The morning passed peacefully. Lily went to school in a private shuttle, and Elena sat in the office handling the books for the Obsidian. Everything felt so normal she almost forgot someone out there wanted her dead. Then the phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Elena hesitated for a heartbeat and answered, "Hello, Mrs. Hart." The voice on the other end was cold, distant, unfamiliar, or should I say, Mrs. Vale. Elena shot to her feet, heart slamming. "Who are you? That is not important. What matters is that I have something you want." And then she heard a familiar cry through the line. "Mommy. Mommy, help me." The blood in Elena's veins turned to ice. Lily. Someone had taken her daughter. "Lily!" Elena screamed. "Baby, I am here." "Enough!" The cold voice cut in. "The West Side warehouse. 1 hour. Come alone. Tell anyone, and the girl dies. Try to contact Dominic and the girl dies. Bring anyone with you and the girl dies. Do you understand?" "Yes," Elena whispered, tears already sliding down. "Yes, I understand. Please do not hurt her. Please. 1 hour." The line went dead. Elena grabbed her phone and tried to call Dominic, but there was no signal. She tried again and again, but the screen only showed no service. Someone had jammed the signal. Someone had planned this carefully. She glanced toward the door where the 2 guards still stood in silence. But something was wrong. They were not looking into the penthouse the way they usually did. They were looking outward, as if waiting for something, or as if they already knew what was about to happen. Elena understood immediately. The guards had been bought. She had no one to turn to. She was completely alone. Her thoughts spiraled. This had to be one of Dominic's enemies, someone trying to use her and Lily to control him. If she told anyone, Lily would die. If she did not go, Lily would die too. She had only one choice. Elena wiped her tears, pulled her coat from the closet, and quietly left the penthouse through the fire stairs she had discovered the week before. She was ready to trade her own life to save her child. 40 minutes later, Elena stood in front of an abandoned warehouse on the west side, her heartbeat pounding like war drums. The door creaked open with a sound that raised gooseflesh, and she stepped into the dark. Inside, the air reeked of mold and rust. Weak light from a few old bulbs spilled down, throwing shadows that danced like ghosts along the walls. And in the far corner, Elena saw Lily. Her daughter was tied to a chair, her mouth taped, green eyes red from crying. When she saw her mother, Lily tried to scream, but only muffled sounds came out. "Lily." Elena lunged toward her, but a figure stepped out of the darkness and blocked her path. Victor Cross. "Hello, Elena." He smiled, the smile of a man who believed he had already won. "I was wondering how long it would take you to get here. You Hart women really are stupid. Both of you walked right into the trap." Elena went rigid, shock pinning her in place. "Both? What do you mean both?" Victor laughed, the sound echoing through the empty warehouse. "Your sister. 10 years ago. Same thing. She got a phone call saying Dominic was in danger. Come alone, or he dies. And she came, like a good little lamb, walking to slaughter." Elena felt her knees threaten to give way. Serena had died in a trap like this, and now she was standing inside the same trap. She was not killed because she was with Dominic that night. Victor stepped closer, his eyes bright with a sick kind of delight. She was killed because she was about to tell him the truth. About the song, about how she was not the talented one, about how she had been lying to him for years. Richard Vale does not tolerate weakness, and love, Mrs. Hart, is the greatest weakness of all. Your sister made Dominic weak, so she had to go. Your husband Marcus found out the truth and was going to tell Dominic, so he had to go too. And now you. Victor stopped right in front of Elena, the smile on his mouth, the smile of a devil. You are making Dominic weak again. And Richard Vale has given me the order. Tonight you and the brat will disappear, and Dominic will become the cold, heartless monster he was always meant to be. Elena stared at him, then looked at Lily crying in the corner, and at last she understood why her sister had to die, and she knew she was next. Dominic knew something was wrong the moment the meeting at the port ended too quickly. There was no shipment being held. There was no problem to fix. Only a few low-level men stammering apologies about a mistaken report. He pulled out his phone and called Elena, but no one answered. A second call. A third. Still nothing but silence. His heart began to beat faster. He called the guards at the penthouse, and there was no signal there either. Dominic slammed into his car and drove back to the penthouse at twice the legal speed. When the elevator opened, the apartment was empty. Elena was not there. Lily was not there. And the two guards stood like statues by the door, faces pale when they saw him. "Where are they?" Dominic asked, his voice so cold the air itself seemed to stiffen. The guards glanced at each other, neither daring to speak. Dominic did not wait. He drew his gun and fired into one man's leg. A scream tore through the space as the body hit the floor. The other guard dropped to his knees immediately, shaking. "I will ask one more time," Dominic said as he stepped forward, planted his boot on the wounded man's leg, and forced another scream from him. "Where are they?" Victor, the guard who could still speak, stammered through his terror. "Victor Cross. He paid us. He took the girl from school. Then he called the woman. He said something about a warehouse. West Side warehouse." Dominic went still for a single second. Victor. The man he suspected. The man he had been waiting to confront at the perfect time. But Victor had moved first. Dominic lifted his phone and made one call. One order. Gather everyone. His voice was no longer the voice of the man who kissed Elena last night. This was the Shadow King. West Side warehouse. Every man we have. Now. He ended the call and looked down at the two traitors, gray eyes cold as a frozen hell. "If one hair on their heads is touched, I will burn this city to the ground, and I will start with you." Meanwhile, inside the warehouse, Victor shoved a sheet of paper into Elena's hands. "Sign this. Give up custody, leave the city and never come back. Do it and you both live." Elena stared at the paper, then at Lily crying in the corner, her daughter shaking, green eyes flooded with fear. Elena looked back at Victor, and something ignited inside her. Not the fire of anger, but the fire of a mother willing to do anything to protect her child. "No," she said, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. "I will not sign anything. You can kill me, but I will never abandon my daughter." Victor lifted an eyebrow, amused, admirable, but stupid. He signaled one of his men. "Fine, kill the brat first, let the mother watch, then maybe she will change her mind." The thug drew his gun and stepped toward Lily. The child screamed behind the cloth over her mouth, struggling against the rope. Elena felt time slow. She could not let this happen. She would not let this happen. "Wait," she shouted. "I will sign. I will sign. Just please, do not hurt her." Victor raised a hand to stop the thug, a victorious smile spreading across his face. "I knew you would see reason." He handed her the pen and the paper. Elena took the pen, her hand trembling, but not from fear. She was calculating. The distance from her to Lily, the position of each armed man, the nearest exit, and when Victor leaned down to watch her sign and let his guard slip for a single moment, Elena moved. She drove the pen straight into Victor's hand, with all the strength she had. He howled and jerked back. Elena sprang toward Lily, tore at the ropes, yanked her daughter into her arms. "Run," she cried, and dragged Lily toward the back door. But they did not get far. Two men blocked the way, guns leveled at them. Elena clutched Lily tight, shielding her with her body as she backed into a corner. There was nowhere left to go. "Impressive," Victor said as he approached, his hand slick with blood but the smile still curling on his mouth. "But useless. You heart women are all the same, brave but stupid. He drew his gun and aimed it straight at Elena. Any last words? Elena closed her eyes and held Lily tighter, whispering into her ear. I love you, baby. Mommy loves you so much. A gunshot cracked, but there was no pain. Elena opened her eyes and saw Victor staring down at his own chest where blood was spreading across his white shirt. He turned, disbelief on his face. In the warehouse doorway, framed by the blinding light from outside, stood Dominic Vale. The gun in his hand still smoked. Behind him were dozens of men, armed to the teeth, surrounding the entire warehouse. His gray eyes were colder than Elena had ever seen. This was not the man who cried when she played the violin. This was the Shadow King, and he had not come alone. Hell cracked open inside the warehouse. Dominic's men poured in from every direction, gunfire roaring like thunder, glass shattering, screams rising and breaking, bodies dropping onto the cold concrete. Victor's crew was overwhelmed almost instantly. They never expected the Shadow King to arrive that fast, never expected their trap to become their own grave. Dominic moved like the shadow of death, the gun in his hand barking again and again, every round finding its mark. He drove forward toward Elena and Lily, never letting his eyes leave them for even a second, his body turning into a living shield for the two women who now mattered more to him than anything else. Get down, he shouted, shoving Elena and Lily behind a stack of wooden crates. Stay here. Do not move. Elena clutched Lily close, covering her ears against the brutal noise around them. She watched Dominic fight, and for the first time she truly understood why the entire underworld feared him the way it did. He was not a man. He was a storm, a catastrophe, death wearing a black suit. Minutes later, the battle was nearly over. Victor's men were either dead or on their knees with hands raised. But Victor Cross was no longer where he had been. In the chaos, he had vanished. Dominic turned back to find Elena and Lily, and his heart stopped. Victor was behind them, one arm yanking Lily out of Elena's grasp, the other holding a gleaming knife to the child's throat. He had been shot in the chest, blood soaking his shirt, yet he stayed upright on the mad will of a dying man determined to drag someone down with him. Drop the gun, Dominic, Victor rasped, a twisted smile on his pale face, or I will cut her throat right here. Dominic went rigid, his gun still aimed at Victor, but unable to fire. Lily was crying, green eyes flooded with terror, and the knife hovered only millimeters from her throat. She has your brother's eyes, you know, Victor said, his voice dripping with sick pleasure. Marcus had the same look, begging, terrified. Right before I cut his brakes and watched his car go off the cliff, it felt as if someone drove a hot blade straight through Dominic's heart. That confession, the final confirmation of everything he had suspected. Your father ordered Serena's death, Victor went on, savoring the agony on Dominic's face. I was just the executioner. She was going to tell you the truth that night, about the song, about how she was not good enough for you. And Richard could not let that happen. He needed you to be the Shadow King, cold, ruthless. So Serena had to die. And when Marcus figured out what really happened, he had to go too. Accidents are so easy to arrange when you know the right people. Dominic trembled, not with fear, but with the effort of keeping the fury from swallowing his mind. And now you, the great Shadow King, Victor laughed, forcing the knife tighter against Lily's skin until a small bead of blood appeared, cannot even save a little girl. Elena watched, her heart breaking with terror for her child, and she saw a shard of broken glass on the floor, sharp as a blade. She did not think. She moved. While Victor's attention was locked on Dominic, Elena snatched up the shard and lunged from behind, driving it into Victor's shoulder with all the strength of a mother trying to save her child. Victor screamed and spun, and the knife in his hand sliced into Elena's shoulder. She fell, blood spilling fast, but she had done what she needed to do. Victor released Lily. Instantly, Lily ran to her mother, and Dominic fired. The bullet shattered Victor's knee, and he collapsed with a savage howl, the knife flying from his hand. Dominic stepped forward and stood over Victor's writhing body, gun aimed straight at his face. Kill me. Victor spat blood and laughed like a madman. Kill me like your father would. Prove you are his son. Dominic looked down at the man who killed Serena, who killed Marcus, who nearly killed Elena and Lily. His finger tightened on the trigger. One shot and it would all end, but then he lowered the gun. No, he said, his voice cold as ice. Death is too easy for you. You will rot in prison for the rest of your miserable life, and every day, every single day, you will wake up knowing you failed, that Richard Vale used you and threw you away like garbage, that everything you did was for nothing. He signaled his men. Take him. Make sure he survives. I want him to live a long, long life behind bars. Then he turned back and dropped to his knees beside Elena. She was holding Lily, blood still flowing from her shoulder, but her amber eyes were bright when she looked at him. Dominic tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped her wound with hands that trembled with worry. You are crazy, he whispered, his voice threaded with love and anger at the same time. Attacking him like that. You could have died. Elena gave a weak smile. She is my daughter. I would die 1,000 times for her. Dominic gathered them both into his arms. Lily pressed between them, the three of them clinging to each other amid the wreckage of the warehouse. But he knew the battle was not over. Victor was only a puppet. The one pulling the strings was still out there. Richard Vale, his father, and that man never left loose ends. Dominic took Elena and Lily to a secret hospital known only to the closest people in his circle. His private doctor was already waiting and immediately moved Elena into surgery to treat the wound in her shoulder. Lily refused to leave her mother, crying and clinging to Elena's hand until Dominic knelt down, gathered his niece into his arms, and promised her that her mother would be all right, that he would not let anyone hurt them ever again. When Elena had been taken through the doors and Lily had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion in the arms of a trusted nurse, Dominic stood. He stared through the glass into the room where the woman he loved lay, and something colder than ice crystallized in his gray eyes. It was time to end this. He drove alone to Richard Vale's estate, on the edge of the city, the old mansion where Dominic grew up, where he learned how to become the Shadow King, where his father sat on his throne and moved the world like a dictator king. The 2 guards at the gate tried to stop him, but one look from Dominic made them step aside. The Shadow King did not need permission to enter his own home. Richard Vale was sitting in his study behind the massive oak desk where he had ruled the empire for 40 years. He did not look surprised when Dominic walked in. If anything, he was smiling, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Dominic, Richard said, his voice deep and commanding as always. I assume Victor failed. He always lacked the backbone for matters that truly required it. Dominic said nothing, only walked closer and stopped across from his father. 2 men looked at each other, and between them lay 10 years of lies, the blood of the innocent, the wreckage of a family that might have been happy. I know everything, Dominic finally said, his voice flat as water before a storm. About Serena, about Marcus, about everything you did. Richard did not deny it. He did not even bother to pretend regret. Instead, he rose and walked to the window, looking out over the wide garden. I did everything for you, he said with a twisted pride. To make you strong, to make you the Shadow King everyone fears. Look at what you have become, the most powerful man on the East Coast. That was my gift to you. Fury flared in Dominic's chest, but he held it down. He had not come here to lose control. He had come to finish this on his own terms. You killed the woman I loved, he said. Each word fired like a bullet. You murdered my brother, your own son. Richard turned, his eyes cold as stone. Serena made you weak. She was turning you into a sentimental fool, ready to throw everything away for a smile and a song. I did what had to be done. And Marcus? Richard shrugged, as if he were talking about dealing with a bothersome rat. He was going to tell you the truth. He was going to destroy everything I built. He made his choice when he decided to betray the family. Dominic stepped closer until only a few paces separated them. And now you tried to kill Elena and Lily, a 6-year-old child, your own granddaughter. Richard laughed, the sound hollow and cold. Look at you now, risking everything for another heart woman. History really does repeat itself. That weakness of yours, Dominic, that sentiment, it will destroy you. Dominic held his father's gaze and spoke with a steadiness he had never felt before. That weakness is the only thing that makes me human. You tried to turn me into a monster. You succeeded for 10 years, but I am done being your creation. Richard moved closer, his stare sharp with challenge. If I had to do it again, I would. Every single thing. Serena, Marcus, all of it. You are my legacy, Dominic. Not some woman, not some child. The Vale Empire. That is what matters. Sentiment is a disease. I cut it out of you 10 years ago. I will do it again if I have to. He stopped directly in front of Dominic and lifted his hand as if offering an invitation. So do it. Kill me. That is what you came here for, is it not? Show me you are still the Shadow King I created. Dominic looked at the man who gave him life, raised him, turned him into a weapon, and stole everything he loved. For one breath of time, he truly wanted to pull the trigger, to watch the light fade from those cold eyes, to make Richard Vale pay in blood for what he had done. But then he lowered the gun. "No," Dominic said, and for the first time true surprise crossed Richard Vale's face. "You want me to kill you. You want me to prove I am the monster you created, that everything you did was worth it, that in the end I am just like you." He stepped back, his face calm. "I will not give you that satisfaction." Richard frowned, not understanding. "Then what? What will you do?" Dominic smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You will be taken to a nursing home. A small, forgotten place in the middle of nowhere. No visitors, no phone, no connection to the outside world. Your assets will be frozen, your power will be stripped, your name will be erased from the Vale Empire." Richard's face drained, and for the first time, real fear appeared in his eyes. "You cannot do this. I am your father. I built everything you have. You will die alone," Dominic continued, his voice cold as ice. "Forgotten, irrelevant, and every single day, you will wake up knowing your legacy. The son you tried so hard to shape, chose love over hate, chose humanity over power, chose to be everything you despise." He turned to leave and signaled the men waiting outside the door. "That, father, is a fate worse than death." Richard roared and lunged at Dominic, but two men seized him and held him back. "Dominic, you cannot do this to me. I am Richard Vale. I am your father." "Dominic." Dominic did not turn. He walked out of the mansion and left his father's screams echoing behind him like the wail of an era ending. The Shadow King had won, but victory always came with a price. A month passed like a dream Elena still did not quite dare to believe was real. The city bustled the way it always had, but beneath that calm surface, everything had changed completely. Victor Cross was convicted on a long list of charges, from murder to kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and every other crime Dominic had spent weeks quietly gathering proof for. The trial swift and discreet, the sentence life without parole, the rest of his days to be spent in the highest security federal prison, with legs permanently ruined. The true story of Serena and Marcus's deaths was released in a controlled way, enough to clear the names of the dead without unleashing a scandal that would shake the whole city. And Richard Vale simply vanished. No one in the underworld dared ask where he had gone. They only knew the Shadow King had handled his father in his own way, and that was all they needed to know. Some whispered he was dead. Others murmured he was living out his final days in some far-off nursing home, forgotten by the very world he once ruled. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in between. Elena recovered slowly in the penthouse, her shoulder wound healed, and leaving only a small scar she wore like a medal earned by a mother who fought for her child. But what brought her the deepest joy was not her shoulder. Dominic took her to see the best surgeon in the country, a specialist in hand injuries she never could have afforded. After a careful examination, the doctor said words Elena never thought she would hear. Her wrist could be operated on. With the newest techniques, she could play the violin again, not for endless professional hours the way she once had, but enough to do the things she loved without being ripped apart by pain after only a few minutes. For the first time in 8 years, Elena had hope, real hope, not the thin, fragile kind she had clung to in long, lonely nights. And that hope came from the man she once believed was a monster. Dominic was changing too, in ways Elena never expected. He began turning the Vale Empire from illegal to legal, a transformation that would take years, but he was determined. Smuggling operations were shut down. The illegal networks were cut away. In their place, he invested in real estate, restaurants, hotels, things Lily could someday feel proud to talk about. "I cannot change the past," he told Elena one night as they stood by the window looking out over the city. "But I can choose a different future. For Lily, for you, for us. I do not want her to grow up ashamed of who her uncle is. I do not want her to have to lie about her family the way I always did." Elena looked at him and felt her heart fill with something she had forgotten the feeling of long ago. Love. Not the blazing, hurried love of youth, but the kind that has walked through fire and remained standing. Stronger, deeper, truer than anything that came before. Lily was the happiest of all three. She had fully recovered from the trauma of the kidnapping, largely because love wrapped around her every day. She called Dominic Uncle Dom, followed him through the penthouse like a little shadow, demanded stories every night, and never stopped asking a million questions about everything from why the sky was blue to why Uncle Dom never smiled at anyone else but always smiled at her. One night, while Elena sat on the sofa reading and Dominic worked at the desk nearby, Lily ran in after brushing her teeth. She climbed up between them, looked from her mother to Uncle Dom, then back again with a seriousness so intense it was almost funny. "Mommy," she said in her clear little voice, "can Uncle Dom be my new daddy?" The whole room went still. Elena looked at Dominic and saw him looking back at her, gray eyes lit with something she was afraid to name. They had never spoken about the future. They had never put words to whatever existed between them. They had simply lived day to day, savoring each moment, afraid that if they said it aloud, it would vanish like a dream. But Lily, with the fearless honesty of childhood, asked the question neither adult had dared ask the other. Dominic looked at Elena, then down at the little girl waiting with wide green eyes. And in that moment, Elena understood there were some questions that did not need words. They only needed courage. Christmas night overflowed with lights and laughter, and the obsidian had never looked more dazzling. Warm golden strands wrapped around marble columns, a towering tree rising in the center of the hall like something sacred. Yet this was no longer a hidden nightclub for the underworld. It had been transformed into a legal fine dining restaurant, and tonight was its first charity concert. Every dollar of revenue pledged to a fund supporting orphaned children. Exactly 1 year ago, in this very hall, Elena Hart played a piece of music and changed all of their lives forever. And tonight she would play it again, but not as a cleaning woman, stealing a moment with a bow in her hand. This time she was the featured artist of the evening. The wrist surgery had gone better than anyone dared hope. 3 months of painful physical therapy, hundreds of hours of patient practice, and at last Elena could play the violin again. Not the endless marathon performances of her youth, but enough to do what she loved without paying for it in tearing pain, enough to come alive inside music again. Elena stood behind the curtain with the violin in her hands, her heart racing. She looked down at the red dress Dominic chose for her, simple yet elegant, and she felt like an entirely different woman from the one in a faded uniform a year ago. "Mommy, you look like a princess," Lily said beside her, green eyes shining with pride. The child wore a small white dress, blonde hair braided neatly, looking like a tiny angel. Elena knelt and kissed her forehead. "Thank you, baby. Wish Mommy luck." Lily nodded with solemn certainty. "You do not need luck, Mommy. You are the best violin player in the whole world." Then it was time. Elena stepped onto the stage. The spotlight fell over her, and the entire hall went silent. She saw Dominic in the front row with Lily on his lap, both of them watching her with love and expectation filling their faces. Elena lifted the violin, set it against her shoulder, and began to play Velvet Requiem, the piece she wrote 12 years ago, the piece that brought her here, to the man she loved, to a life she never dared dream of. But this time the music carried a new ending, an ending she wrote over the past months, while she lay in the penthouse healing after surgery, while she watched Dominic and Lily play together on the balcony, while she realized life had handed her a second chance, no longer only a mournful lament of loss and pain, but a hymn of hope, of love, of rebirth. The final notes trembled and faded, and the hall erupted in applause. Elena bowed, tears sliding down her cheeks, but these were tears of happiness. She had done it. After 8 years, she had played the violin for an audience again. Then the unexpected happened. Dominic stood, handed Lily to a trusted staff member, and walked up onto the stage. A murmur swept through the room. No one understood what was happening. The Shadow King never appeared in public like this. Elena stared at him in astonishment as he stopped in front of her, and then Dominic Vale, the most powerful mafia boss on the East Coast, dropped to one knee right there on the stage, in front of hundreds of people. "I do not have a ring," he said, his voice carrying through the hall on the microphone. "I do not have pretty words. I do not know how to do this the right way. I only have a promise." He took her hand, and his gray eyes shone with a love he had hidden for 10 years, and finally dared to speak aloud. "I promise to protect you, to love you, to spend every single day earning the right to call you my family. You and Lily, both of you. I promise to be the man Marcus would have wanted for you, the man Serena would have approved of. I promise to give you and Lily the life you deserve." Elena cried, no longer trying to hold it back. For 8 years she had been afraid of hope, afraid of love, afraid of playing the violin, and the man in front of her had given her all of it back. "I spent 8 years afraid," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Afraid to hope, afraid to love, afraid to play. You gave me back all of that. You gave me a reason to live again." She knelt, so she was level with his eyes, both hands gripping his. "Yes, Dominic, yes. 1,000 times yes." The applause thundered. but they did not hear it. They only looked at each other, foreheads touching, and in that moment the world held only two people. Then a small blur rushed onto the stage. Lily ran up and leapt into Dominic's arms, green eyes bright as stars. "Does this mean I can call you Daddy now?" she asked, her clear voice ringing through the hall. Dominic held her tight, and for the first time in his life he did not try to hide the tears rolling down his face. "Yeah, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick. "It does." The three of them clung to each other on the stage beneath warm, golden lights and unending applause, and the peace that once carried the meaning of death had become a song of rebirth. Spring came to the city like a promise finally kept. Cherry blossoms bloomed across the central park, soft blush petals drifting on a gentle wind, laying a fairy tale carpet over the paths, and within that dreamlike scene, three figures strolled along the narrow walkway by the lake. Dominic Vale, Elena Vale, and Lily Vale, a family. Their wedding had taken place 2 months earlier, simple and private, with only a handful of the closest people present, Elena in white, Lily as the little flower girl, and Dominic crying as he spoke his vows, the Shadow King crying in front of others without shame, because he had finally learned tears were not weakness, they were proof of a heart still beating. Now they were living the life they once believed they would never have, an ordinary life, breakfasts together in a sunlit kitchen, afternoons where Elena taught Lily violin, while Dominic listened with a smile that would not leave his mouth, nights when the three of them curled up on the sofa, watching cartoons until Lily fell asleep between them, ordinary, simple, and more precious than any treasure. Lily ran ahead, chasing the cherry petals spinning in the wind, her clear laughter echoing through the park. She was 7 now, and she looked nothing like the thin, hungry child Elena once struggled to raise in that battered apartment, her cheeks rosy, her eyes bright, her smile constant. She was happy, truly happy. Dominic held Elena's hand as they walked slowly behind their daughter, petals falling into their hair like pink rain. He had changed so much over the past year. Still the Shadow King at work, still powerful and frightening when he needed to be. But at home he was only Dom, Elena's gentle husband, and Lily's devoted father. "I renamed the song," Elena said suddenly, still watching Lily playing ahead. "It is not Velvet Requiem anymore." Dominic turned to her, gray eyes soft. "What is it called now?" Elena smiled, a smile Dominic knew he would never tire of even if he lived 100 years. "New Dawn," she said, "because that is what you gave me. A new beginning, a second chance, a reason to believe life can be beautiful again." Dominic stopped, drew her into his arms, and kissed her forehead beneath the falling blossoms. "New Dawn," he murmured. "I like that." Elena looked up at him, and in her eyes was a strange light Dominic had never seen before. Something different, something she was holding back. "Speaking of new beginnings," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. She took his hand and slowly placed it on her belly, and in about 7 months, our dawn will get a little brighter. Dominic went utterly still, his hand rested there, and his mind struggled to catch up with what she had just said. 7 months. Her belly, brighter. "A baby," he whispered, his voice breaking. Elena nodded, happy tears sliding down her cheeks. "Our baby," Dominic cried. In the middle of a crowded park, beneath a rain of cherry blossoms, the Shadow King stood and cried like a child. But these were tears of joy, of happiness, of a man who once believed he would die alone, and now held everything he had ever dared to want. A child, his blood, a small life that would call him father. He pulled Elena tight and cried into her hair, and she held him and let him cry as long as he needed. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out as she ran back to them. "Why are you crying? Are you sad?" Dominic released Elena and knelt to meet his daughter's eyes. He wiped his tears but did not hide them. "No, sweetheart," he said, his voice still thick. "Daddy is happy, very, very happy." Lily tilted her head, not understanding. "But why are you crying if you are happy?" Elena knelt beside them and took Lily's hand. "Because sometimes when you are so happy your heart feels like it is going to explode. The only way to let that happiness out is through tears." She drew a breath. "And Daddy is crying because he just found out you are going to be a big sister." Lily's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open. "A big sister. A real big sister. With a real baby." Elena nodded, smiling through her tears. "A real baby, growing right here." She guided Lily's hand to her belly. Lily stared down with awe and curiosity as if she were looking at a miracle. Then she squealed, a burst of joy ringing across the park, and threw her arms around both her parents. I am going to be a big sister, she shouted through laughter and tears. I am going to be the best big sister in the whole wide world. I will teach the baby everything, how to walk and how to talk and how to play violin and how to make Daddy smile. The three of them held each other in the park while cherry blossoms fell like blessings from heaven. A family built from grief and loss, from secrets and lies, from blood and tears, and also built from love, from hope, from the courage to begin again. Some stories end with happily ever after, but their story was only just beginning. It was late, and the city beyond the penthouse windows had fallen asleep beneath a scatter of lights that looked like stars spilled onto the earth. Lily was sleeping soundly in her own room, her small belly rising and falling in a steady rhythm, her pink lips slightly parted with a smile that still lingered from a sweet dream. In the living room, Elena sat at the grand piano Dominic had bought for her, her fingers gliding softly over the keys. She was learning to play from him, a new instrument to add to the long road of music that had carried her through so much. Dominic stood behind her, his arms gently circling the waist that was slowly rounding beneath his hands, his chin resting on her shoulder as he listened to simple notes made rich by feeling. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not played that night?" Elena asked suddenly, her fingers pausing on the keys. 1 year ago, in that ballroom, if I had not opened that glass case and played the violin for Lily. Dominic was silent for a moment, his warm breath brushing her neck. "Every day," he finally said, "and every single day, I thank God you did. I thank God for your courage, for your love for Lily that made you break the rules, for that melody that pulled me out of the darkness I had been living in for 10 years. Elena turned her head and looked into the gray eyes she loved. "The song brought us together. Serena, Marcus, all the pain, all the loss, all the years of suffering. It all led to this, to you, to Lily, to this family we have built." Dominic nodded, his eyes bright in the soft yellow light. "Then it was worth it. Every broken piece, every tear, every sleepless night. If all of that pain was the price I had to pay to find you, to find Lily, to have this life, then I would pay it again, 1,000 times over." Elena smiled, turned back to the piano, and began to play a new melody. Not Velvet Requiem, not New Dawn, but something entirely new, simple, gentle, like a lullaby, like hope spoken in a whisper. "What is this one called?" Dominic asked, listening to every note. Elena smiled without turning around. "I do not know yet. I am still writing it." She laid a hand on her belly where a small life was growing day by day. "It is for our children, for Lily, for the baby, for all the children we might have after that. It is for the future we will build together, brick by brick, note by note, day by day." She stopped playing and turned to him, amber eyes overflowing with love. "It is the song of our second chance." Dominic bent and kissed her hair, the familiar scent of jasmine filling him, and he looked out the window at the sleeping city below and the night sky with a few stars still shining. Somewhere in the night, the memory of a violin still echoed, no longer the sorrowful requiem of the past, of loss, of hearts broken beyond repair, but a sonata of love reborn, of hope rekindled, of two people who walked through darkness and found each other in the light. Because there are melodies too beautiful to die. They simply wait, in darkness, in silence, in broken hearts, until someone brave enough comes and plays them again. Dominic and Elena's story ends here, but the lesson it leaves behind remains, that true love can heal the deepest wounds, that family is not only blood but the choice to love one another every day, that a painful past does not define our future, and every person deserves a second chance at happiness, that sometimes the greatest miracles in life come from the moments when we believe we have lost everything. Thank you for listening all the way to the final moment of this story. How do you feel? Did this story touch your heart? Did it remind you of losses, of hopes, or of relationships in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear the voice that comes from the deepest part of each heart. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video with the people you love so they can listen to moving stories every day as well. Your support is the motivation that helps us continue bringing content that is meaningful and worth your time. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a life filled with joy and peace each day. Remember that no matter how hard life becomes, there is always a new dawn waiting ahead. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.